Well, thank you very much for staying with us for this landmark and remarkable coverage. It's happening in a year where we're commemorating 30 years of democracy. There was much expected for what the president was going to say tonight. This is an election year after all. We'll get 2 SONAs this year. That was the State of the Nation as delivered by the president. What is the state of the nation where you are? It's one of the questions we're interested in, but we'll also find out what the reaction is from members of the House. So let's take you down to the precinct itself now, and we'll kick off with Abra Barbia. Abra.
Yes, Iman, thank you so much. The President has just finished his 8th State of the Nation address, also the last one for this Parliament, of course. We will be having a second one later this year. So tonight's address was largely a look back at how his administration has done over the last few years. But to help me to get into more analysis, I'm going to be speaking with Dr. Pieter Groenewald of the FF+, the leader of the FF+. Of course, meneer, dankie dat jy vanaand met ons praat. Growth. He spoke about eradicating, he spoke about overcoming, he spoke about fixing things. There was so much talk about what's been done so far. And throughout this, I heard groans from the opposition benches. Were you one of those groaning, sir?
Of course. I must be quite honest with you. I'm worried about the president. I'm worried that he is completely out of touch with reality in South Africa. He made, for the last 5 years, he spoke about growth, building dams, building and ensure that there are high-speed trains in South Africa. The ANC is not capable of building anything. In the last 30 years, they actually destroyed South Africa. Just to give another example, he told us about the opportunities, business opportunities, job opportunities for the young people. But the unemployment rate amongst the youth in South Africa is more than 60%. It is laughable. In which world does the president live? I mean, he's totally out of touch with what ordinary people experience in their daily lives. Therefore, it is quite clear, and I predicted that he was going to use the State of the Nation address to actually have an election campaign, trying to convince people how good government the ANC was over the last 30 years. It is totally unacceptable, and I do believe what people experience in reality will ensure that they also realize it is time for a change in government and to get a president who is in touch with the realities of South Africa.
As I was leaving the chamber, I was also hearing people were talking about electioneering campaign, and that's how he's ending off. But one of the things that I think drew the most attention from the opposition parties was when he spoke about corruption and what the country's done so far to eradicate corruption and how much money has been recouped. I heard loud boos.
Well, as he himself at one stage said that the accused number one when it comes to corruption is the ANC. And I told him before, but you are number one, of accused number one. And what did you do? It is quite clear up to now. They did not really, I didn't see any high profile person, specifically when it comes to politicians, who had been arrested or anything like that. How many more years are we going to have this situation? He even referred to the safety and the security, about 20,000 new members for the police services. Last year, they brought in about 10,000, but they didn't add enough instructors to, can I say, train those people. So what is the standard of training that they received?
Dr. Groenewald, I'm so sorry. I have to stop you. I know Dr. Groenewald is very passionate about police because that's, of course, the committee he serves, and I'm so sorry. But I'm now going to be handing over to my colleague, Sakina, who's standing by with another party.
Well, thanks, Abra, and I've got the UDM's Ngabayomzi Kwankwa with me. Your reaction, what did the president say that caught your attention?
Absolutely nothing. It was a campaign speech that went wrong because everything we had today had been repeated many times before. What the president was really trying to do was to officially launch or unofficially launch the campaign of the ANC this year, by making a very laundry list of promises, very long, especially towards the end, where they make commitments about the kind of South Africa they want to build. They've had 30 years to build that South Africa and they couldn't build it. The other issue is you hear him mention a lot of things that they have not been able to do. The speech is, to put it mildly, idea-rich to some extent, but lacking in coherence. There are these many things that he would want to do, but you can't see how they fit into the broader strategy of how they want to grow the economy, reduce unemployment, and deal with matters of inequality, and cite statistics that have to do with poverty. That did not really help his cause much when you look at the improvement in 30 years, when you consider what other countries have been able to do in 20 years, with limited resources, so half the amount of resources that we have in our country, but they were just very efficient in making sure that they utilize resources properly. We did not walk out with the feeling that the ANC has taken ownership of the mistakes it has made, the mess that it has created for our country. It also did not leave us with the feeling that they know how to take the country out of the quagmire in which they put it. So it would require a discussion, a proper discussion, because with the kind of SONA today, which was very long by the way, with the kind of SONA we received today, it's going to be interesting to see how the minister is going to put the nuts and bolts of the finance budget, because most of it must be financed. All the bridges which are very haphazard, random here and there, you don't see them fitting into, if you like, you discuss an infrastructure-led growth, even though the president is not going to put it like that. But if you know that this is the strategy of how you want to reignite growth, surely you should be able to cite proper billions and also be able to cite as to how many people would benefit from that, which sectors and so on, because you need that kind of detail with the problems that South Africa has.
Well, that's the UDM's Ngabayomzi Kwankwa, his reaction. Let me hand it over to Samkele.
Well, Sakina, the president, this time around, a less shopping list of promises and commitments. But speaking of what they supposedly did in the past 5 years and in the past 30 years, Mr. John Steenhuisen, leader of the official opposition, your response to the State of the Nation address?
Well, it was something more out of Alice in Wonderland than a reality of what's really going on the ground. A laundry list of recycled projects and promises that have been made since 2018 that haven't come to fruition. We have promised crime was going to go down. It is up. We have promised jobs are going to be created. Unemployment is at record highs. We have promised that gender-based violence was going to be dealt with. It is growing. We have promised that load shedding was going to come to an end. It has got worse than it's ever been. And we have promised that the fight against corruption was going to yield results. We're further down on the corruption index in the world than we were under President Zuma. So this was a State of the Nation that was very, very long on promises, very short on delivery.
When you look at delivery, particularly looking at the water projects and the water limitations that South Africa is facing, municipalities, metropolitan areas are sometimes left without water. Do we get a sense that there is some sort of plan to resolve the water crisis?
No, there's no plan. What we heard tonight was about the Lesotho Highlands Water Project. He's spoken about that in SONA since 2018. Giyani, he mentioned the Giyani Water Project. The people in Giyani still do not have water. The reality is you're not going to solve the water problem unless you inject a massive amount of money into infrastructure to replace and repair aged municipal infrastructure that has not been maintained sufficiently over the last 20 years. If you don't have that capital injection, municipalities can't afford that capital injection. If you don't have a project to get those pipes in the ground, to get those reservoirs built, to get those pump stations working, you're going to continue to see water shedding accelerating, just as load shedding accelerated because of the lack of maintenance and repair.
In some of the projects that they're going to embark on, particularly that have been proclaimed by government on the building of a nuclear power station, 2,500 megawatts, what are you looking at in the issues of coming out that will look into resolving the energy crisis, renewable energy in the just transition as well?
Well, the best thing he could have announced tonight was, I'm breaking the state monopoly on energy. We would have opened up a whole new greenfield industry. We would have allowed entrepreneurs and investors and innovators to come in. Instead, we're going to cling to it. Nuclear, all good and well. It's a 15 to 20 year project in the making. It's not going to help our situation right now. We need power in our grid, in our factories, in our homes to create jobs and grow the economy. We cannot attract investment without energy. So what we need to do is to open up the market, to break up Eskom's monopoly and allow private sector players to come in. This is how countries around the world have dealt with similar problems. They've opened up, they've let other players in, they've broken state monopolies. It's exactly the route that President Ruto in Kenya is embarking upon. He's breaking up state monopolies and allowing investment investment and innovation to follow. I have no doubt that we could attract significant investment into South Africa, but nobody trusts the government with their money and nobody believes the government can deliver. If we open it up, I think we're going to be able to attract the money that we need to resolve the energy crisis. It's not going to happen as long as government clings to its monopoly.
Thank you very much, Mr. John Steenhuisen. That is the leader of the official opposition. Over to you, my colleague Abra Barbia.
Thank you so much, Sam. I'm speaking with the leader of Al Jamaa in Parliament, Mr. Hanif Hendricks. Sir, the President spoke a lot about things that have been achieved over the last few years, which is what we expected him to do. He did a look back at what his administration has done for the country over the last few years. One of the things he specifically raised was the issue of access to clean water. And he mentioned how many households in the country now have access to clean water compared to previous years. I know this is an issue that you have spoken about before in Parliament. Access to clean water is something that you've been very expressive about in the House. What did you think about what he was saying about how many people now do have access?
Look, it is very sad that the President doesn't know the situation on the ground. You find that many villages and people have to compete with dogs and animals to get access to water. And that's why Al Jamaa's position is that there should be a right to water, because access means you have to compete with animals. It means you've got to travel long distances. And the water department, there are 1,000 criminals that must still be charged. There's 1,000 disciplinary hearings that must be held. How can the President expect South Africa to have a sound water supply and system for the people if the money is looted, if the officials working in the departments and in the other structures like the water boards are all criminals and subject? So it is very disappointing that the President doesn't seem to know what the condition is on the ground.
Mr. Hendricks, when you came over here, in fact, I could see your face was very, very down and you looked almost shocked. You said to me, I can't believe you were in complete shock.
Yes, I was in complete shock, you know. How can the President suggest that men must sign a pledge to deal with gender-based violence? You need much more than men having to sign a pledge. How can he boast about a minimum wage, whereas that wage is a starvation wage and not a living wage? Does he think that those people earning a minimum wage and still can't put food on the table will be impressed with this particular SONA? The only positive thing that the President said was he's looking for a pen to sign the NHI bill into law, and we will support him there. But I think the the high-level response at this stage is that the President has highlighted the situation the country was in when we moved from apartheid to a new dispensation. It shows just how bad apartheid was. So the improvements that has been made is commendable. But the President himself also said that the last 10 years has been a disaster. So if the last decade has been a disaster, how can he come to the nation and tell the nation we did very well?
Mr. Hendricks, thank you so much for your time. That was Mr. Hanif Hendricks, who agrees with some of the things that the President says. And Mr. Hendricks always makes an effort to give the President props, to commend him where he thinks he did the right thing or said the right thing. But tonight, Mr. Hendricks says he's basically flabbergasted after hearing what he heard in the chamber. Sakina, is your guest as flabbergasted as mine was?
I'm not sure. We'll find out right now. Mr. Gwede Mantashe is with me, and of course, Mineral Resources and Energy, also the chairperson of the African National Congress. Are you flabbergasted by anything you heard, as some of the other guests have been here?
No, all that has been happening this evening. The President was reporting back, which is called accountability. I'm still looking forward to see the debate next week, because everybody else is making a lot of statements. But the President was accounting blow by blow on things that has been done and what we're planning to do.
So let's talk about your portfolio, especially as it pertains to the energy crisis in the country. Lots of talk about, the three portfolios that are seized with essentially making sure that the lights stay on as much as we can. We had a disastrous year last year, 332 days of load shedding. Your department, DMRE, what culpability do you take for what has happened?
The only response we are having is, one, ESCOM was never in DMRE, you know that.
Yes.
Two, the only responsibility we can take is that we'll give that department the critical minerals when they want it. And when they want to order additional generation, we do authorize it. That's why you'll find that we've authorized more renewables than any other previous administration. And those that are on the transmission and those that are in the pipeline are more than any other administration. It is us who have said, let's not over-focus on one technology, renewables. We must partner it with base load technologies, which are coal, nuclear, and gas. If we focus on those, we'll resolve the problem.
So we're hearing a lot about privatization, in one way or another, bringing more private interests, private entities on board, even with regard to energy generation. So there's a lot to talk about there. We had the mining summit this past week. Talk to us about some of the opportunities that exist there.
Yeah. It is not privatization. If the state has no capacity, private sector is not going to cooperate. If the state has capacity, the private sector will cooperate. And therefore it is a partnership between public and private sectors. But if the public sector is weaker, we are not going to do anything. That's why our focus has been in building the state capacity. If you remember when we took the Romco pipeline from Mozambique to here, everybody wanted to give it to the private. I said, no, the state must take that pipeline. We are building a new petroleum company for the country because it requires the state to be competent and have capacity for the private sector to participate. And the report that was given today does acknowledge the work that is being done to build the state in order for it to facilitate and monitor the private sector participation.
Quite a bit of talk also around the prospecting licenses in the mining industry, and I saw earlier in the week you were talking about unlocking many of those opportunities. So again, there, with regard to who actually comes in, who actually those licenses are awarded to, let's talk about that. And again, it's expensive, but in terms of protecting South African interests?
We've launched an exploration fund. 500 million is not a hell of a lot. It's small for exploration, but it's a starter. And we're hoping that it will be able to attract other interested parties to contribute to that fund. Our target is not big explorers. Our target are emerging companies that are still hungry to get place in the mining industry, and we are going to facilitate that. That's why we said it must be administered by IDC, so that we cannot be accused of conflict of interest. It must be administered straightforward, commercially, and begin to generate more mines. Actually, if you go to Witbank, Sakina, I wish we can take that talk, you will see that Witbank has transformed. Many people ask the question that where does the president get the 39% black ownership in mining? And I said to them, just look at Seriti, it's a black-owned mine company. Look at Tungela, it's a black company. Look at Exaro, it's 35% black-owned. I gave them a list of them. So if you look at that, you will see that if it's not 39, it should be close there, it should be around there. Because we don't theorize ownership. We point at people and human beings who are emerging black capitalists.
Who are you going into coalition with? EFF, DA?
We are not working for that. We are working for winning outright. That's what we are waiting for. A coalition is an accident in politics, and it becomes a consequence. So we can't work for a consequence. We work to win the elections and we're working hard for it.
Worst case scenario, if you don't win outright, who is the better one you would rather get into a coalition with?
When you do scenario planning, Sakina, there are always three scenarios. You never emphasize your worst case scenario. You always emphasize the best case scenarios, because if you don't get the best case scenario, you go to the most ideal.
Okay, you're not going to tell me who the most ideal is.
That's it.
The DA.
No, I'm not worried about that.
Okay, I'll hand it over to Samkele.
Thank you.
Well, Sakina, as you are negotiating coalitions there with the Tiger, I am with Mr. Vulonkosina Hlabisa, Bulawayo. Any surprises there from the State of the Nation address?
Samgelo, there were no surprises. The address was not inspiring. It was a repetition of what has been said in the past 5 years. It was an admission of failure if you look at it in totality. Because at some stage, the president, even himself, he laughed when he saw almost the whole house laughing to show that, President, what we are saying is not true. It came to the issue of potholes and roads which he said are being fixed throughout South Africa. It's a joke because we all know potholes are a common problem in our country. He spoke of a state capture, that they are doing all it takes to deal with state capture. Unfortunately, state capture is a shame to ANC. We haven't seen senior leaders of the ANC implicated in state capture being taken into task. He avoided Phala Phala at all, which is another shame for the ANC. You know, spoke of the issue of many students graduating, passing matric. Yes, we agree, we see big numbers, but the unfortunate part, over 30 years, the pass rate in terms of pass mark has been lowered to 30%, which is not good, because if you look at the university dropouts, the number is very high. He spoke of the NSFAS producing many students, but unfortunately, thousands of graduates are sitting at home unemployed. He spoke of the police arresting people, but it doesn't tell us that how many are prosecuted and given tough sentences, to send a message that crime does not pay and it does not have a place in our society. Eventually, he delivered a manifesto giving promises after promises, and he said they now have a plan to deal with load shedding. Fikile Mbalula is on record. Last year he said, December 2023, load shedding will be a thing of the past. As we speak, we are still sitting on load shedding. Now the president says they have a new plan to deal with load shedding. It's another promise which has been made before, but with no success. This was admission of failure, repetition of promises with nothing new, tangible on those promises.
Thank you very much, Bulawayo. Before I go to my colleague Abra Brabe, we've been keeping you waiting. Mr. Nicholas Nyati, 2 questions for you. Are you impressed as the DA youth?
I am very impressed with the DA youth, and I'm also impressed with the...
No, impressed with SONA.
No, I wasn't impressed. Remember when we met before SONA, I said to you, this will be a repetition of things that we've seen in the past. Let me tell you about the true story of Tintswalo. Tintswalo is a 30-year-old who's unemployed, uneducated, and probably is going to die because of the high crime levels that are happening in this country. Uneducated because of the high dropout rate in matric. Uneducated because they cannot access institutions of higher learning. What the president has shown us is that a 30-year-old needs to stand up and start fighting for their future. In 1994, we might have voted for our freedom. This year, in 2024, we have to vote for our survival as young people.
Looking at some of the issues that are raised, youth unemployment is at a sky high in this country at this point in time. Do you think there are any concrete plans to resolve this particular ticking time bomb that is about to explode?
The government that we've had for the past 30 years has broken all of the wrong records. Highest crime rate, highest unemployment, highest uneducation, and there is no plan. Ramaphosa is simply recycling all plans. He's not taking any decisive actions. If we want to fight crime, why do you still have Bheki Cele there? If you want to solve load shedding, why do you still have people like Tiger working in energy? I mean, there is no solution from this ANC government, and the power is in our hands, especially as young people, to vote for a government that is serious about service delivery. And the best way to do that would be to compare apples and apples. Look at where we govern. We're getting things done, and that's what South Africa needs.
I must take you to Kukuletu and Tunyanga, and take you to Umlazi, and take you to informal settlements. Debate for another day.
Even go tomorrow.
Debate for another day. Ebra Babia, over to you.
Sam, thanks so much for that. With me now, I have one of the longest serving members of Parliament, Reverend Kenneth Meshwe, who of course is the leader of the ACDP. Sir, thank you for joining us tonight. There are two issues you want to touch on. We're going to speak crime. Of course, you serve on the SABC committee, and we're also going to speak about the state of health in the country and the NHI bill. First of all, sir, in the past, crime stats were released every year. In recent years, we now have our crime stats, I think it's every quarter, right? With it being every quarter, is the stark reality of crime in our country, does it make it so much worse when you see the numbers every quarter?
Sure. Definitely does. And it has been a fight to get to the situation where we are, where we could be informed quarterly of what was happening. So we are happy with that. We can see whether the police are succeeding or failing. And definitely the police are failing because we still, until today, have a conviction rate of less than 10%. Now, when a government fails to protect its people, which is its fundamental responsibility, then that government is saying indirectly to the population, we can't protect you. It is time for you to look for somebody else to look after you. That's why in the ICDP we are saying 30 years is too long to make promises and fail to keep your word. So it is time for government, the current administration, to leave. I liked it when the president said the last State of the Nation address. Indeed, it was his last State of the Nation address because people are tired. And people are tired, and because they're tired, the president must go and enjoy his millions and billions and the money that has been hiding at Palapala. He can go enjoy it. But the people of South Africa wants to have a safe life in their homes and in the streets.
Indeed, sir. The people of South Africa also want access to good quality healthcare. You said that there's something specifically that you want to challenge the president on that he said in his speech tonight. You spoke about the bus incident.
Well, with the bus incident, the president said he visited some of the victims in hospital, in a rural public hospital. And when you ask them whether they want to be transferred to a public hospital, they said no. They are looked after very well in that village, public hospital. They don't want to go. Now, anybody living in South Africa who knows the reality of what's happening in public hospitals will say, I don't believe the president was telling the truth there. He should have said that was a joke. But it was not a joke, and it was just a plain lie. And I don't think it is correct for the president to do what he did tonight. Now, people want to go even to hospitals, public hospitals that are clean, that have medication. He went at length to tell us how many hospitals they built. They built many hospitals, many clinics, but when you visit those clinics, they hardly have medication. Many of them are white elephants. And so we believe that government that fails to protect its people and that protects to also protect their health is definitely at the end of their lifetime. And I think this government must go and allow opposition members who have been there for a long time, who care for people, to show the public what they can do. And the truth is, we can do much better than what the ANC has done. They don't care, we care. And that's what the people deserve, to have a government that cares for them.
Reverend, thank you so much for your time. Of course, the Reverend also off camera, we spoke about NHI briefly. And yes, it hasn't been signed yet, but the president of the ACDP says that they will be getting themselves up for a court challenge if the president does assent to that bill. Sakina, I think I'm handing over to you now.
Thanks, Abra. And I'm joined by the Deputy Minister of Higher Education and Training, Mr. Buti Manamela. Mr. Manamela, of course, you know, your portfolio has been in the news, but firstly, your takeaway from what the President said. Anything that you are holding on to in order to make your band better?
Look, I think the big thing is that especially through the post-school education and training, we have made significant changes in terms of quality for the majority of South Africans, and I think he's been able to trace it over the last 30 years. Access to basic education, the type of social payments that government make into families, but also beyond that, access to higher education. With all of that, I think what the President has been able to say is that it's not only about what happened over the last 5 years or so, but it's also about the investment that this government has made over the last 30 years. And I think the story of Tintswalo is a story that resonates with many, and it rebuts the idea that this government over the last 30 years has failed, precisely because if you look at any intervention that government has made over the years, in one way or another, every South African has somewhat felt the impact and the work that this government has done. And I think for me, what's even more crucial is the fact that most of these things have been done working together with South Africans.
So if we look at what's happening in the sector at the moment, for one, what do you make of the date and the fact that we receive our matric results in the new year, the following year, which is the year after the national matric exams would have been written? The impact that has on institutions of higher learning, the timing factor, is that not a concern?
Well, I mean, I think it's something that, both departments have had a discussion on, and something which we obviously need to avoid. Yes, there are thousands of grade 12 learners who have passed, but because of that delay are still awaiting confirmation, for instance, from the National Student Financial Aid Scheme. Many of them, could have potentially lost their spots at universities. So it's those lessons that we, have to factor into planning for, next year's registration. And I think it's hopefully it's something that basic education also understands in terms of its impact. We do appreciate the reasons that they've advanced, that they actually need to do more work in terms of quality, and it was about their workspace and making sure that the results are credibility are not questioned. So it's something that we really have looked into and discussed, and hope that we'll do much better in the next academic year.
What about the institutions of higher learning, new institutions that have been promised? Because we look at the number of applications as opposed to number of actual places available in these institutions, and it's a huge mismatch.
Look, we had just above 500,000 students who qualified to go to universities and universities of technology. The spaces that were provided for new entrants were, about 80,000 short of that number. We have over the last, not even 30 years, by the way, over the last 10 years or so, expanded the TVET sector with 16 new TVET college campuses, which helps, in cushioning that demand. Many of the institutions, 30 years ago, the system universities had only 400,000 students. This year, we can confidently speak about close to 1 million students who are going to go to university. So the sector has expanded. Yes, we need to do much more so that we, can accommodate population growth, but also the number of students who graduate from, matric. But also what I want to emphasize, Sakina, is, and I know many of the parents want their kids to go to university and all of that. I really want to, especially those parents whose kids are this year going to grade 12, please go and check out some of our TVET colleges. We've done significant progress in investing in infrastructure, in investing in the quality of learning and teaching there, and the type of graduates that we produce, most of them are in demand by the private sector. So let's really do look into those.
Well, thanks, Buti Manamela. And of course, Samkele is next, and let's find out who he is with. Right, see, Samkele is not quite ready. Abra may have someone with her. Abra?
Sakina, thank you so much. With me, I have Mr. Mandla Gallo of the AIC. So we unfortunately missed you guys this morning for expectations. So I don't know what expectations you had this morning prior to the speech, but how do you feel now coming out afterwards?
No, really, we didn't expect anything from the State of the Nation address this year. Except the fact that they are always recycling, from the old stories. But when we came here listening to the President delivering his State of the Nation address, I was touched by one element where he was mentioning the beneficiaries of your social relief of distress grant, where these people, poor people, are getting 350. From my constituency, which is Matatiel, people are staying or residing in deep rural areas where, for instance, when they go to town, they use 70 rand for your transport fee. And when they reach town, sometimes they don't get the money. And this person has borrowed the money in the first place. Now he doesn't get the money in town. How he is going to go back home? So it's terrible. The other thing that I have observed, the President didn't mention anything about the traditional leaders and our kings. And with the people who are residing in the rural areas, we are very much concerned when our leaders are not being mentioned, are not being taken care of. And what we want our leaders not to depend on your COGTA as a department. We want our kings, our traditional leaders to get a budget direct from the treasury, not from the department. Because if you go to the rural areas now, you will find that we are still living in two different nations. There is a gap. There's a bridge between the rural areas and the urban areas. So the ANC government did nothing, in these 30 years of democracy.
Mr. Gallo, thank you so much for your time. That was Mr. Mandla Gallo of the AIC. And I see we have the ATM with Sakina.
Well, thanks, Abraham. Mr. Vuyo Zungula from the African Transformation Movement with me. And I saw you had actually put out in the lead up to the SONA, you'd actually done a diagram where you were looking at the last State of the Nation address to this one. So did this one deliver? What did you take from it?
What the President has done today was to lie and mislead South Africans by making comparisons as to 30 years into democracy. This is what apartheid was, these were the realities in apartheid, and this is how the country is now. Whereas he should have been focusing on him as a president to say this is his 8th SONA that he's presenting. Now, if you look at the indicators from 2018 versus now, unemployment in 2018 was 29%, now it is in excess of 32%. People that are living in poverty were 13 million back then, now they're 18 million. If you look at the issue of the fuel prices, it was 16 rands per litre, now it is in excess of 22 rands. But he won't want to talk about those facts because it paints a grim picture on his leadership. And he further lies and undermines the intelligence of South Africans. I want to make an example about the question of state capture. He speaks about 10 years of state capture, whereas he was there as number one, as a deputy president of the country, having responsibility of deployment as part of his responsibilities. But when he speaks about state capture, he speaks as if he was not involved. And some people that are implicated in the State Capture Commission report are serving in his cabinet, appointed by him. Therefore, you've got a president that is economical with the truth because he wants to mislead South Africans.
So I looked at that diagram that you drew up, and you looked at quite a few indicators in terms of the start of the sixth administration in 2019 and where we find ourselves today. And it made for some instructive reading. But I want to ask you about the state capture part of it, because the president made mention of, I think, about 8 billion rand that was recovered, and the cost of state capture, depending on where you're looking, could have run into around 500 billion. So he spoke about the independent directorate that was set up. Do you think he's doing enough in terms of trying to recoup and deal with the issue of corruption?
Look, he cannot be doing something about corruption, whereas there's corruption in his own office. You'll recall what happened during the COVID times, whereby his own spokesperson was implicated in corruption. Also, if you look at the question of Phala is a question of corruption and abuse of state resources as well. Now, again, on the question of state capture, he can't be speaking about state capture, whereas he appoints. It's not a case whereby there are people that elected to be members of parliament. It's him that says this person, he's going to make him a minister. So he can't be speaking about state capture, whereas he's the one that appoints people that are implicated in the State Capture Commission report.
Mr. Zungula, thanks so much for your time. And that, of course, Mr. Vuyo Zungula of the African Transformation Movement. Over to Samkele.
Well, Sakina, you can hear there the ATM is not chuffed at all about this State of the Nation address, saying it's a shopping list of promises, delusions of grandeur, falling short of just going there about the President's State of the Nation address. But one wonders what the UDM thinks through his Secretary General. What did you make sense of the President's State of the Nation address?
As a UDM, we're thinking that it's a repetition of hashed realities that the President has dreamt of while he was sleeping in his pala bed with dollars. So what he came here, he came with dreams, as he had done in the past 6 years, to come and give us hope that is non-existent. He spoke about Dinzolo and making such a fictitious example of the realities on the ground, whereby we do not know who is the Dinzolo that he's speaking about, because the Dinzolos that we know are the ones that he promised 1 million jobs in Alexandra and 1 million houses, which until this day that has not yet transpired. We are speaking about young people who are languishing in poverty in townships and in rural areas, where are the jobs that he's speaking about? Because at the end of the day, whatever that he's reading or saying that investment has been done, has it went down into the ordinary citizens of South Africa, abahleliyo apha eKhayelitsha right now with no hope, with no dreams. At the end of the day, that is what is causing the high rate of crime in our country, the high rate of unemployment. Doctors right now, we've heard on the news through you guys that they are not employed, many doctors in the country, but the government is speaking about going outside the country to go and get set skills. It's the same thing that happened during COVID, whereby we saw doctors coming into the country while we still had our graduates sitting at home to come and assist in fighting that scourge. So everything that the president has done going into load shedding, he has promised many a times in each and every SONA that they are very close into making sure that they eradicate load shedding. But still today we see that we are going on load shedding, stage 6, up and down, all of that. You see, when our matriculants were writing exams, there was load shedding. But then when rugby was playing, there was no load shedding. So you see that there's inequality which is exacerbated by our own government, that when our young people from Lokshin who are going to write exams for their future, then the government does not care. So we have a government here whom they only dream and they're only thinking that the hope that they're putting in our people, it is enough, and not actually translating into the service delivery that is actually needed in our communities.
Thank you very much to the Secretary General of the UDM. My other colleagues are already. Abra Barbia, over to you.
Sam, thanks so much with me, and ma'am, thank you for being so patient with us. I have Ms. Gwendra Mokgopa of the ANC Treasurer General, of course, who has been waiting here for quite a while. We said we're going to talk about the youth of this country. There's lots of concern about the direction in which the youth of South Africa is going, especially with all the challenges that they face today? And I think at the root of it is unemployment.
Yes, indeed. The message that the president tried to put across, which I believe was quite clear, is that we have achieved a lot. And the story of Tintswalo is the story of where we come from in terms of young people who are now around 30. They were born in a free country, and they had certain support from government to try and do what the constitution mandates us to do, to redress. And yes, many of the youth that are unemployed have benefited from a lot of these programs, including from programs like NSFAS. The economy has not transformed adequately to absorb them. And that is an area of breakthrough that the past 5 years also looked at. And that is why the president spoke about the YES program. Amongst others, we have introduced a novel program of teacher assistance by these young people that have degrees but were unemployed. So I think if we can be as creative and innovative, both in public and private sector, these young people can get into jobs and learn on the jobs without us seeking that they must have experience prior. Investing in these young people is investing in the booming of our economy in the next few years. The other issue that is very critical is that we're also talking about even minerals, critical minerals that other countries are using to develop batteries for electrical vehicles and all that. And President touched a bit on that as well, to say this is where our economy must be going, the future. And the youth are also digital savvy, ICT savvy. And as we build this fourth industrial revolution, or is it now going into the fifth? The youth are our pillar to break through and to be globally competitive.
Ms. Ramokgopa, thank you so much for your time. Ms. Ramokgopa of the ANC, trying to give the youth of South Africa, the Tintswalos of South Africa, something to look forward to give them some hope for their future. Sakina, you're going to be speaking with Brett Herron of the Good Party now.
Indeed, Abra. Brett Herron, thanks so much for coming through. So what did you make of the president's speech? Was there anything in particular that stood out for you?
I think the thing that stood out for me most was the lack of a coherent plan for getting our country out of the doldrums of low economic growth. And low economic growth is the root of many of our problems: the high unemployment, the deepening poverty, the debt to GDP ratio, which constrains us in the borrowing space. So I was really hoping that instead of just the rhetoric around economic growth, we would have a very coherent plan as to how we were going to get there. I was encouraged by the prominence of the commitment that to green energy, the green economy, introducing renewables into our electricity grid. It's not a new plan. It was there in 2010. So, and there have been some stumbling along the way, but the commitment to the green economy and to the just transition was really encouraging. I think one of the big disappointments was the failure to take that bold step that we've been asking for, which is to introduce a basic income grant. And the president's comment that they're looking to improve the social relief of distress grant really didn't take it far enough. And is not consistent with how the ANC have been saying publicly around their commitment to basic income support for unemployed South Africans who cannot find work in an economy that's not generating jobs.
So that is, of course, one of the big ones, the basic income grant, because the minister last year did say that they are now at a point where they're probably looking at modalities of, how this is going to work, but that the basic income grant was as much as a fait accompli. So given that we are going to see a continuation, more or less, of the social relief of distress grant, how far do you think we can push that? How much do you think would be a reasonable amount? Because people are complaining about the amounts that they're currently receiving, but how much can the fiscus really afford?
We've done a lot of research actually, in this space, and the fiscus can afford about R1,000 per month with allocative efficiency. So it's about choices that the government must make around what they're going to allocate the funding to. And we can accommodate about 12 million people at R1,000 per month between the ages of 18 and 60 who can find work. R1,000 per month puts people just above the food poverty line and just below the lower bound poverty line. Now, South Africa's already made a commitment in the National Development Plan to eliminate all South Africans who are living below the lower bound poverty line by 2030. 2030 is now 6 years away, and we can't be dealing with R350 per month for 8 million people who have to reapply and reapply, and this grant is extended as a temporary grant in each budget. We really needed the President to come out and say we're going to implement basic income grant or income support as a priority for government, and all other treasury allocations will fit around that.
Well, Brett Heron, thanks so much for stopping by. And that, of course, the view from the Good Party, Abra. And Abra is standing by, so let's find out who she's with now.
Sakina, thank you. I'm going to be speaking with Matthew Parks of COSATU. Matthew, hi. I think my colleagues are trying to steal you from you over here. Can we just have you in shot, please? You said it was a bit of a mixed bag.
Yeah, so look, I mean, there's some good things, there's some thin things too. But I think given the challenge we're facing as the working class, trade unions, workers, there's some good things we can take out of it. We've managed to reduce unemployment over the past year from 46% to 41%. But of course, no sober person can celebrate 4 out of 10 South Africans being unemployed. But we want to appreciate the progress we made. We had hoped to hear more details about how to increase the presidential employment program. We hope to see it be increased to about 2 million people, but he made a commitment in that regard to increase it, so that's positive. We really want to appreciate the SOD grant with all of its limitations, and there's many, but it's given a lifeline to 8 million people with no source of income. He made a commitment to increase it, to extend it, that's good, but we need to hear what are the rands and cents. So hopefully the budget can give it, but it needs to be adjusted for the value that's been lost to inflation since 2020, ideally to increase to the food poverty line. On Eskom, I think we must say to government they've done good work. We had 12 hours of load shedding a day last year, which was a total disaster. It's now 2 hours and less a day, but we can't celebrate yet because Eskom is still fragile, but there's good progress. And he made a very useful announcement of investment in 14,000 kilometers worth of transmission lines. So that's key to unlocking renewable energy. That's key to getting us out of the crisis. And of course, the Eskom debt relief is taking place. Transit, he mentioned there's progress there, but we're not so sure. We're not seeing enough kind of granular detail around it. But transit is so critical right now because it's having a huge impact upon mining and manufacturing, agricultural jobs. We don't think we've got 2 years to rebuild it. We've got a few months. Otherwise, we're going to lose shipping companies moving to other countries. But I think it's quite worrying that we're not seeing details mentioned on other embattled SOEs like Metro Rail, Denel, SABC, the Post Office, Post Bank, and so forth. The commitment around local government for us didn't hold water. We've heard about district development models, but when we look at the stats of the Auditor General around the state of local government, having 36 municipalities struggling to pay staff, that's a scary, scary deterioration. But we do want to appreciate it around SARS, the South African Revenue Service. The Governor's done excellent work in rebuilding SARS, and it shows you if you invest in public services, you appoint competent management, additional staff, you can make things move quickly. So SARS is what's really helping us save the situation right now. They need to give more support to increase tax compliance because that can give additional revenue to the state. Good news, around 30,000 additional police officers, but I think more needs to be done around crime and corruption.
Matthew Parks, thank you so much. I don't know if I have time for the SACP, sir. Can you just step forward, please? Mr. Madala Masuku of the SACP, we don't have much time. Just quickly, your reaction to what the President said tonight.
We are very impressed by the way the President has presented the State of the Nation. He has covered the achievement in the past 30 years and also the achievement that have been covered in the past 5 years. He has set a clear goal in terms of how to respond to the areas of weaknesses. In our agreement and engagement with them, we have been focusing on poverty alleviation and on job creation and dealing with issues of electricity and also dealing with crime, and he has ticked all the boxes
And as far as we're concerned, we can only advise that one of the things for us to gain attraction is to make sure that you intensify the capacity of the state, including the state-owned enterprises, so that they can guide every other contribution by any person in South Africa, including the private sector.
Thank you so much. That was the SACP who say they were impressed, but I'm now going to be handing over to Sakina.
Indeed, Abra, and we move now to the Presidency, Minister Khumbudzo Ntshavheni. Thanks so much for your time this evening. So I would imagine you knew what was coming in that speech. Was it delivered well enough for you?
The delivery was perfect, and I did not know what was coming. He takes the time, the last stretch, to do it himself, and we can only contribute to the ideas. It's him who finally says yay, nay to what we put in there, and it's a collective effort, but ultimately it's his speech, and he takes ownership, and he structures it the way he structured it. I was quite impressed. I'm sure you saw me sitting. Sometimes I was sitting on edge and say, wow, and also the narrative of the Ntswalo, for example, and it's a story of what we used to call the black diamonds, that if there was no interventions of TEFSA during my days, I don't know whether your days were TEFSA, because you are definitely not the National Student Financial Aid person. So during the TEFSA days, those the first graduates in their families, the first ones to go to a university or a TVET college, who also were the first ones to get a professional job. And they are today, though the cost of living is a bit tough on them, but they are today what we call the national breadwinners, if you remember the terminology we used during COVID. And those are the ones that we say, even when there are challenges in the country, check the progress we've made. And the other issue that was raised, and people were saying, why are you raising this issue around the poverty? And you remember the saying that success is not the measure of the height you have achieved, but the depth from where you come. Then the IMF and World Bank are continuously indicating that though we are not yet there, but we are continuously succeeding in the fight against poverty. We are no longer at 79% of the poverty index. We are at 55% as we stand today. And that is an improvement. We would prefer it to be at 0%, and we'll continue to work and strive towards that 0%. How are those interventions being done? Those interventions are being done by making sure that there's the youth employment stimulus to encourage business and to make sure young people can be in employment, to make sure that they're not in education, not in training, are gainfully employed, or there are small businesses that they are running so that they can contribute meaningfully to the economy. That's why we spoke about the time of COVID-19, government committed a 200 billion rands credit guarantee scheme. Unfortunately, the banks only used 20 billion rands of that, and we're going to have a re-engagement with them to say, how do you support the small businesses that are suffering today because of the economic hardships, which some of the internal shocks, but some are external shocks because of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, now the Israeli war in Palestine, and also the many conflicts that are taking place across the globe. And how do we make sure those shocks are sparing small businesses that are just recovering from the impact of COVID-19? Because if you go the world over, it's small businesses that create employment, and that's what the president was talking about. But also the narrative that, following the Nelson Mandela narrative, that I've climbed a hill and I'm only taking the opportunity to be on this vista and just rest a while to observe and enjoy the view, but only for a while, because I still need to go, because it's a long walk to freedom. We have come this far. There's no need to deter. We must walk on and continue to consolidate the gains. There are still challenges, the challenge of gender-based violence, and the call out is that the police and government only come after. It's a reaction. It must be a societal war, and the pledge is necessary, not only by men but also by women, to say, I will not stay in a relationship. I'll go to the Tutuzela Center that has been created as a result of the National Strategic Plan to fight gender-based violence and femicide.
And I guess it's a matter of perspective, Minister. You know, you talk about the fight against poverty, inequality, that triple axis still very much with us. You talk about the gains that have been made. The reality is we still have children who go to bed hungry in this country. We have a crisis of not just poverty, but of hunger in this country. We have 27% of children under the age of 5 who are stunted. We are talking about a country whereby we are still considered one of the most unequal in the world, even with the gains that you actually mentioned. We are talking about youth unemployment that, by the expanded definition, sits at above 70%. So, matter of perspective much?
it's not a matter of perspective, it's a matter of the reality. The children that go to bed hungry, that's why we provide at our schools more than school nutrition that is now also reaching 3 million are reached for breakfast, but 9.2 million are receiving food at our schools. And remember, during the COVID-19, we were taken to court because we took it for granted that children would be able to eat at home, and they were not able to eat at home. The courts ordered us to say you need to continue to provide a meal at school because this is the only meal they have. So it's not a perspective, and we're alive to that reality, and that's why the interventions. And that's why we say part of the work that we need to do is about building viable communities that can do food gardens, that when resources are available and support is available, we can make sure we feed the nation, we can make sure we are food secure, not dependent on export. So it's not a perspective issue, it's that we are a country with many challenges, because where we come from, during apartheid, 79% of the population was excluded, and now we are providing for everybody. And therefore the achievements that we have achieved are not a little, but the challenges that lay ahead are very huge. So even when we remain in the negative side of the global indices, you must also consider the progress we've made in those indices.
Well, Minister in the presidency there, Khumbudzo Ntshavheni, who is juggling quite a lot in that portfolio, I must tell you. But of course, Samkele is standing by, and I see he's with Mr. Sheikh Imam. I don't know if it's the right NFP, but Samkele will find out, I'm sure.
Well, there are two NFPs. Are you the right NFP or the wrong one? Are you in court, not in court?
There is, well, let me just say this, yes, indeed. There is only one NFP. But what has emerged is there's 2 or 3 factions, and that started from after having the problem in 2016 when the NFP was sabotaged and did not participate in that election, and lots of them lost their positions, and that's what gave rise to the current situation. And of course it's not getting any better, I must be honest with you, it is not getting any better. However, there will be some announcements made in the next week or so, and let me not preempt anything at this stage.
State of the Nation address, were you impressed?
State of the Nation sounded like, for me, an election campaign, I must be honest with you. Well, you know, the president touched on a whole lot of things. At some stage, I got the impression that even the ministers didn't know what the president was talking about. But very importantly, you know, he touched on crime. He speaks about 10,000 police officers every year. I think the president is out of touch with reality. Unless you have a holistic approach to the crime situation, what is the root causes of crime? You can put tens of thousands of police officers, you're not going to deal with the issue of crime. You need to deal with the socio-economic conditions, the high levels of poverty, the high unemployment rate, the availability of alcohol, the 24-hour taverns that are open, the drugs, the gangsterism. You need a holistic approach to that. The fact that there's a market for stolen goods. The fact that the criminal justice system doesn't seem to be working. Criminals get away after committing crimes. You, the very same taxpayers, is paying for legal aid for them in any ways. So these are some of the problems. On the NHI, President speaks about the NHI, and yes, it's a brilliant thing. We must welcome it. Are we ready for it? No. Do we have the money for it? No. I was hoping the President today was going to tell us that he was going to make funds available. Minister of Health has clearly indicated that we're not going to be able to implement it if we don't have the money. If you look at the state of primary health care in the country, it clearly tells you that we're not ready for it. You're talking about medical practitioners and other healthcare workers. There's no budget for it. If you go to all the provinces, they don't have the budget. There's now, as I talk to you, over 1,000 doctors qualified, serve their community service, can't find employment. We are funding them to study, become doctors, and then they are going outside and going and serving the other countries. Is that acceptable? No. President talks about Transnet. It's not a true situation. The true situation, and I'll tell you now. Yes, there's a reduction in the number of ships that are waiting. It is only because shipping companies have diverted their cargoes to neighboring ports because we don't have the capacity. So we're losing those shipping companies that are coming and giving us that business. So that's the other problem.
But thank you very much, Imam Sheikh. I wonder if you've checked your pension, because, my man, you definitely may not be coming back to Parliament.
No. I think 2 things you must remember. There will be a statement being made soon, so you can await that one, number 1. Number 2, but already they say your pension funds that are invested have decreased in value substantially, even that will not be worth anything.
Do you form part of one or two of the NFP? NFP 1 or NFP 2?
No, I have always made it very clear. I will not take sides and do what is right. And I'm not part of any of the factions, and I choose not to be part of the faction.
Well, Mzwanele Nyonso used to have that problem there in the PAC, but he seems to have his ducks in a row. Yourself, are you now ready for elections?
More than the word, Samkel, we are more than ready for elections. In fact, for the past 20, 30 years, we've been participating in elections. This time we're contesting. We are ready.
State of the Nation address, were you pleased? Were you saddened? Were you thinking delusions of grandeur?
More of a election speech and a report back to an ANC conference of someone who wants to come back. Unfortunately, this is his last speech as the state of the president, as the president of the state.
Looking at some of the points that were raised, building of bridges, particularly in the Eastern Cape, road infrastructure, some businesses have had to close down due to poor state of roads in the Eastern Cape.
And then I was so angry when he mentioned that. I'm coming from Eastern Cape. And yet he said, you must ask the Eastern Cape Premier. There's no need for me. I'm staying there. I know people perish in those roads. 32 people just perished on the road in a bus. And that road has not yet been made even to date. And roads are closed in Eastern Cape. In fact, the Premier that is asking us to ask about the state of the roads was just recently on the Women's Day. He had a problem in one area in Tsendane of the road. He could not pass there. So the state of the roads in Tsendane, in Eastern Cape in particular, are bad. It was so painful for the state president to tell us that the roads there are better. That's not true.
We're out of time. Last question. Were you there to submit yourself?
Yes, I had to go there and talk to the state president, former president, and understand everything about him, and I did.
So you went to submit the PAC to MK?
I'll never do that. I'll never submit PAC to anyone. PAC will remain PAC, but PAC will engage everyone, especially opposition parties. The state president is part of opposition parties now. Get that in your mind.
So basically you are saying, let's go into a coalition MK?
No. Basically I'm saying let's talk to everyone who says Africans were robbed of their land and that land has not yet been returned. It's good when they are saying it themselves. All of them were saying PAC was met, but everybody today is speaking PAC language.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mzwanele Nyonso. Over to you, Sakina.
Well, thank you so much, Samkele. And of course, the South African Local Government Association President, Mr. Begistofile, with me here. A lot has been said here in the State of the Nation address. And as Salga, I'm very curious to hear what your reaction is to the President's speech.
Greetings, Sakina, and greetings to your viewers at home. Yes, there's a lot of things that have been said. What is my take home of what it has been said is the commitment to put more energy on the cooperative governance, because cooperative governance failure then results to failure of government as a whole. Now we find it so fascinating to hear President time and again referring to it on different ways. One of the way he was making an example about the school, working various departments together and municipalities, and in another example, it was the DDM. Now that is a sign of trying to build on cooperative governance, and that is our take. The second take that we take home is the beefing up of security, police, and so on. It's very close to our hearts as local government practitioners, because as we attempt to professionalize local government, what we have been seeing over the couple of months is the killing of councillors, traditional leaders, officials of municipality. In recent past, in Gauteng, a senior officer of the Rand Water was shot to death. And this shows how become risky to work for government. And therefore, putting energy on that, it is a very good strategy to deal with the safety and security of people in the country. But the third issue to us, which I believe it should have been picked up, all the killings and everything reflect one thing: morals. You talk about corruption, is moral thing. You talk about killing, is a moral thing. So what it should have been built on is how do we build and go back to our moral conduct as individuals and respect of life. of human life, irrespective where the person is and so on. So those to me are take home with the state of the nation.
Mr. Sofilo, we'll leave it there because I think there's a lot more to unpack, and we will make time to look at that because so many of those problems when it comes to service delivery are located and they do find expression at the local government level. But thanks so much for stopping by. And I believe this is our last guest for the evening, Mr. Athol Trollip. Well, good to see you. Action SA. So I've been seeing you around. So what did you make of the President's speech?
Look, I'll try and make it short because I know it's late. But, it's an election year. So I would have expected President Ramaphosa to tell us about some of his achievements. But he hasn't really got any. Remember, he said that he'd rather be seen as a weak president than preside over a fractured ANC. Well, he's achieved those two things in the last 5 years. So here's the thing. His fictitious Tintswalo does not live in the Eastern Cape. Because the Tintswalo that I know that lives in the Eastern Cape lives in a home that might have electricity and water infrastructure, but nothing comes out of the taps and there is no electricity. She couldn't watch the State of the Nation. She and her peers, 49% of them are unemployed. Her siblings don't get ECD support. So when they get to school, they're already disadvantaged and left behind, and they become part of the dropout cohort that is not calculated in the real matric pass rate. Tintswalo lives in a province that has 2 ports. We produce beautiful agricultural products. We can't export them effectively because it takes so long to load a ship in the Eastern Cape that the product arrives in Europe and China and in the Middle East in a compromised state. That affects Tintswalo's mother, uncles, aunties work on farms and in the ports. Tintswalo lives in a province where the roads do not work, especially in rural areas, despite what the President said. Mazeppa Bay Hotel closed last week because tourists can't get there. Tintswalo lives in a province where when she goes to the clinic, there's no medication. Doctors are in short supply, and the doctors are not being paid in the Eastern Cape. Her political leaders go overseas when they want health care. Tintswalo lives in a province that does not work. So this is an election year. I will go back to the Eastern Cape and I will tell Tintswalo and her family that the President says, "Baraiti," that they're happy and they're taken care of. And you know who's going to evaluate what happened here this evening? Not us as politicians. The man and woman in the street in Tintswalo will decide whether the ANC have done enough to get re-elected. And I'm telling you that despite what the President said, Bazawubuya, yes, they might come back, but they'll be in the benches of the opposition.
So in case Tintswalo decides to vote for a multi-party pact, who would Tintswalo be voting for? Who's going to be the president there?
Action SA in the Eastern Cape, and all of the participants in a potential multi-party charter are going to go and pursue votes in their constituencies so that the sum of the whole is greater than the parts. That's our objective. So Action SA is going to be campaigning in all 9 provinces. We've spent the last 4 years building structures and infrastructure so that we can compete effectively. In the first election, we only contested 6 municipalities and we got 550,000 votes. This time around, we're competing in all 9 provinces.
Who's going to be the president of that pact?
We'll see after the election. You know, we have made a decision that it won't necessarily come from the biggest party. It's going to come to the most appropriate person.
Who's your choice?
Well, I'd vote for Cyril Ramaphosa, but we will have to make beg your pardon, I would vote for Herman Mashaba. Beg your pardon. Slip of the tongue.
What a big slip of the tongue there. Athol Trollip.
I would definitely not vote for Cyril Ramaphosa.
And that was Athol Trollip of Action SA. You see, it's been a long day. Iman, on that note, let me hand it back to you in studio.
Thank you very much. We're having a chuckle, same as you, Sakina. So I want to thank Sakina Kamwendo, Abra Barbia and Samkele Maseko for doing a sterling job just corralling and wrangling all of those politicians at the end of what has been quite a momentous night. The criticism was not unexpected. And I'm going to allow our political editor, Mzwandile Mbeje, just to wrap a bow around today and to write a little bit of an epilogue. Some of our viewers are saying, I want to meet Tintswalo because I don't know Tintswalo in the area that I live. And others are saying, we want to meet the survivors of the bus crash who said they don't want to go to a private hospital. In a sense, these are just obviously just a few sentiments that people are sharing. But was the president real and connected tonight, Mzwandile?
I think in short, the president did touch on some things that have happened. But by and large, some of the things that the president spoke about was more about wishful thinking. And the fact of the matter is that the people can be able to verify the issue of Limpopo, of the bus victims. And then the Dintswalo, you can already hear people are already creating their own Dintswalo. There are those who are saying what the president is saying is quite correct. Of course, there are people who have been helped, but in the same breath, that Dintswalo is struggling because some of the basics that he or she needs to be afforded with are not there. So in short, Iman, what has been happening is that the president, it's not lost on him that this is an election year. So he had to account to the nation what they wish to do, what they have done. But the fact of the matter is that sometimes the situation on the ground does paint a different picture.
Mzondile Mbeje, it's been a privilege partnering with you today on our special broadcast. And it is time for us to pack up our equipment. The lights on the City Hall are going to go out shortly, and we will put this 119-year-old dame to bed. But when South Africans wake up tomorrow morning, what will their state of the nation be? And will it reflect the sentiments that were expressed in the State of the Nation tonight? That's where we leave it. Thank you very much for being with us.